All right, let's talk about 2025. It was an absolutely wild ride for the markets. I mean, it was a year where some strategies just took off like a rocket, while others kind of struggled to even keep up. So we're going to break down all the data, see who won, figure out why they won, and what this whole dramatic story tells us about what might be coming next. But first, you know the drill. We got to get the important stuff out of the way. Everything we're about to go over is purely for informational purposes. Think of it as a look back, a historical recap. It is definitely not investment advice for the future, okay? Cool. So let's jump right in with the big question that really defined the whole year. The overall market had a fantastic 2025, no doubt about it. But some investors saw returns that were nearly double the average. So the immediate question is, how on earth did they pull that off? Well, the answer comes down to a couple of very specific, very high-octane strategies. This slide right here, this is basically the final scoreboard for 2025, and it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Way up at the top, you've got QLD and SSO. These are leveraged funds that posted just massive gains. Right below them, you have MAGs, which is an ETF that's all in on the magnificent 7 tech giants. And then down at the bottom, you have the benchmarks that everybody watches, right? The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. The gap in performance between the top of this list and the bottom is, well, it's huge. Let's just stop and look at this number for a second. Over 32.5%. In a year where the market itself was up a very, very strong 18+%, this top strategy nearly doubled it. That is a staggering figure, and it really just screams how powerful the year's winning approach really was. So let's meet these champions. To really understand how we got to that 32% return, we need to break down the two key themes that just completely dominated 2025, leverage and concentration. Okay, first up, leverage. So what in the world is a leveraged ETF? Well, the simplest way to think about it is that it's a fund built to multiply the daily returns of an index, like the NASDAQ 100. It uses some pretty complex financial tools, like derivatives and debt, to do this. But the goal is super simple. If the index goes up 1% today, a 2x leveraged ETF aims to go up 2%. And wow, does this slide show you the power of that? On the left, you've got the performance of QLD, that's the 2x leveraged NASDAQ fund. And on the right, you've got the standard plain vanilla version QQQ. In a year that had a pretty steady climb upwards, that leverage paid off big time. It turned an already great 18.6% return into an absolutely incredible 32.5%. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wait a minute. If QQQ returned 18.6%, shouldn't QLD have returned, like, over 37%? That's a great question. And the answer is something called volatility decay. See, because these funds reset every single day, any choppiness in the market, the ups and downs, can actually eat away at your returns over the long run. It's kind of the hidden catch that explains why you almost never get that perfect 2x multiplication over a whole year. All right, so the second major theme of the year was concentration. And you know who I'm talking about? The Magnificent Seven. This crew of mega-cap tech stocks has been the main engine of the market for a while now, and 2025 was absolutely no exception. And this comparison is just as eye-popping as the leverage one. On the left, the MAGs ETF, which holds only those big 7 tech stocks, was up over 22%. But on the right, you have XMAG. It holds the S&P 500 without those 7 stocks, and it's up a much lower 15.8%. The key takeaway here is that a massive chunk of the market's total return was driven by these explosive rallies in just a handful of companies, like Alphabet and NVIDIA. But hold on. This is where the story gets a really juicy plot twist. It would be so easy to just look at those final numbers and think 2025 was this smooth, easy ride straight to the top. Oh, you would be so wrong. The year had a dramatic twist right in the middle of it. This timeline basically shows you the roller coaster ride that was 2025. The year kicked off with a huge tech surge. Everything was going great. But then, boom, April hits, and there was a steep pullback where those same high-flying strategies dropped nearly 30%. That's the risk that comes with the reward, right? Then the second half of the year saw this furious AI-driven recovery, which led to the final twist. At the very end of the year, the rest of the market finally started to wake up. And this quote really sums it up perfectly. Yeah, it was a tech-led year for sure, but that rotation into other sectors late in the year, that was a really significant development, and it hinted that maybe, just maybe, the game was changing as we headed into 2026. Okay, so after that wild ride, what are the big takeaways? What does this story actually tell us? Let's boil it all down to the core lessons from 2025's market performance. First, aggressive strategies like leverage and concentration were the undeniable winners. No question. But, and this is a huge but, that higher reward came with much, much higher risk, which that 30% drop in April made painfully clear. Third, the Magnificent Seven were still the main event. But finally, that broadening of the market at the end of the year, that's a crucial trend to keep a very close eye on. And this chart just drives that final point home beautifully. For most of the year, it wasn't even a contest. The tech-heavy NASDAQ, which is QQQ, was miles ahead of the broader S&P 500, or SPY. But just look at where they ended up, in a virtual dead heat. That late rally in other sectors like financials and energy was just powerful enough to close what was once a massive gap. And all of that leaves us with the big million-dollar question for the future, right? Was that late year rotation a real signal that the era of mega-cap tech dominance is finally peaking? Or was the rest of the market just playing a quick game of catch-up before the tech titans take off again in 2026? I guess only time will tell. Thanks for tuning in.